The day my greedy son and his wife won $53 million in the lottery, they kicked me out with the words, "We don't need your pathetic pension cash anymore. Just go die somewhere else." They went pale when I laughed and said, "Sweetie, did you even read whose name is on that lottery ticket? If you're watching this, subscribe and let me know where you're watching from." On a crisp December morning in Cedar Falls, Iowa, I was doing what I'd done every Friday for 32 years, buying my weekly lottery ticket at Murphy's Corner store. Same numbers I'd played since 1992, same ritual, same hopeful little prayer to whoever might be listening upstairs. My name is Cynthia Green, but everyone calls me Cindy. I'm 67, widowed 2 years now, and living in what my daughter-in-law Evelyn likes to call their guest room, though guests usually aren't expected to hand over their entire Social Security check as rent. "Morning, Mrs. Green," called Kevin Young from behind the counter. At 25, he still remembered when I used to bring my son Lucas in for penny candy. "The usual?" he asked with that bright smile that reminded me of better days. "You bet." I handed him my $5 watching as he printed my ticket. Those numbers, 7, 14, 23, 31, 45, with Powerball 18. They meant something. 7 for the day I married Raymond, 14 for the day Lucas was born, 23 for our wedding anniversary, 31 for the house number where we raised our family, 45 for the years we had together, 18 for Lucas's age when he graduated high school. "Cross your fingers for me, Kevin," I said, tucking the ticket into my purse. "Always do. Mrs. Green, you're due for some good luck." If only he knew how prophetic those words would be. Walking home through the December chill, I passed the house Raymond and I had shared for 43 years. The new owners had painted it yellow. Raymond would have hated that. He always said, "Our white house with black shutters looked dignified, like a place where decent people lived and raised their children with respect and values." The irony wasn't lost on me that I was now living with the child I'd raised in that dignified house, and he was treating me like an unwanted burden. Evelyn's BMW was in the driveway when I reached what I was supposed to call home now. Through the kitchen window, I could see her on her phone, gesturing wildly, probably talking to her sister about their next vacation or complaining about having to share their house with Lucas's ancient mother. I let myself in through the back door, hanging my coat on the hook by the laundry room, the same hook where Lucas used to hang his little league jersey, where Raymond hung his work shirts, where normal families hung their things because they belonged somewhere. "Cindy, is that you?" Evelyn's voice carried that particular edge it got when she was annoyed about something, which was most of the time these days. "Just me," I called back, though I wanted to add, "Sorry for existing in your precious house." But I didn't, because I'd learned over these past 2 years that sometimes survival means keeping your mouth shut and your dignity intact, even when both are getting harder to maintain every day. The day Raymond died changed everything, though I didn't realize it at first. Grief has a way of blinding you to the vultures circling overhead, especially when one of them is your own son. Raymond's funeral was on a Tuesday in December 2022. The whole thing felt surreal. 45 years of marriage reduced to a 90-minute service and a luncheon with store-bought sandwiches. Lucas gave a lovely eulogy about his father being a good provider and family man. Evelyn wore black and dabbed her eyes at appropriate moments, though I'd never seen her cry actual tears over anything that didn't involve her credit card being declined. "Mom, you can't stay in that big house alone," Lucas said as we drove home from the cemetery. "It's not practical." I was staring out the window at the frozen farmland, thinking about how Raymond and I used to drive this same route when we were courting. He'd hold my hand and talk about the house we'd buy, the children we'd raise, the life we'd build together. Practical had never been part of those conversations. "I've been managing just fine for 65 years, I replied. "I think I can handle a few more. But the upkeep, the lawn care, the snow removal?" Evelyn chimed in from the front seat. "At your age, Cindy, those things become dangerous. What if you fall? What if something happens and no one finds you for days?" The concern in her voice sounded genuine. I almost believed it myself. "Besides," Lucas added, "we have plenty of room. The guest bedroom hardly gets used, and you could help with the grandkids when they visit." Help with the grandkids. That should have been my first clue. Lucas and Evelyn's house was a sprawling colonial in the newer part of town. complete with a 3-car garage and a kitchen island bigger than my first apartment. They'd bought it 5 years earlier, stretching their budget to what Evelyn called the absolute limit, and what I privately thought was beyond their means. But what did I know? I was just a widow with a paid-off house and 45 years of savings Raymond had carefully tucked away. The guest room was nice enough. Pale yellow walls, white furniture, a view of their perfectly manicured backyard. "It'll be like a comfortable hotel," Evelyn said, plumping the pillows on the queen-sized bed. "Your own space, but with family nearby." The first month was actually pleasant. I cooked dinner most nights, did the housework without being asked, and kept to myself in my room when Lucas and Evelyn needed privacy. They seemed grateful for the help, though I noticed they never offered to pay for groceries or utilities, despite my Social Security check going toward what Evelyn euphemistically called household expenses. By the second month, the requests started coming. "Cindy, could you watch Emma and Jake this weekend? Lucas and I need some couple time. Cindy, could you pick up our dry cleaning? You're already going to the store. Cindy, could you handle the cable guy? We're both at work and someone needs to be here." Slowly, efficiently. I was being transformed from house guest to unpaid domestic staff, but I told myself it was temporary, just until I figured out my next move, just until the grief wasn't so raw, just until I felt strong enough to live alone again. I should have listened to Raymond's voice in my head, the one that always said, "Cynthia, when someone shows you who they are the first time, believe them." By summer, the mask had started slipping. Evelyn's requests became demands, and Lucas developed a talent for being conveniently absent when conflicts arose. "Cindy, we need to talk about the financial arrangement," Evelyn announced one morning over coffee. She'd laid out papers on the kitchen table like she was conducting a business meeting, which I suppose she was. "What kind of arrangement?" I asked, though my stomach was already sinking. "Living expenses, your share of utilities, food, household maintenance. It's only fair that you contribute proportionally to what you use." The word proportionally should have been my second clue. Evelyn had majored in business administration and loved to use corporate terminology to make personal conversations sound official and unavoidable. She slid a paper across the table, an itemized list of monthly expenses with my share highlighted in yellow, $800 for rent of the guest room, $200 for utilities, $300 for food and household supplies, $1,300 total, which happened to be exactly $50 less than my monthly Social Security check. "This seems high," I said carefully. "I'm only one person and I'm gone several hours each day at the senior center." "But you're using the kitchen, the bathroom, the laundry facilities," Evelyn countered. "And when Emma and Jake visit, you're here for the whole weekend, which increases our costs significantly." Emma and Jake were Lucas's children from his first marriage. They visited every other weekend, and I loved having them around. They were 8 and 10, full of energy and questions, and the kind of innocent joy that made me remember why being a grandmother was supposed to be one of life's great rewards. Of course, Evelyn had a different perspective on their visits. "It's exhausting having children in the house every other weekend," she told her sister on the phone one day, not realizing I could hear from the laundry room. "And now with Cindy here, too. It's like I'm running a boarding house." I signed the financial agreement because what choice did I have? Finding an apartment at my age with only $50 a month left over for personal expenses wasn't realistic. And Lucas seemed genuinely concerned about my welfare, even if his wife viewed me as a profit center. "This is just temporary, Mom," Lucas assured me when I expressed doubt about the arrangement. "Until we figure out a long-term plan that works for everyone." The long-term plan, as it turned out, involved me becoming increasingly invisible and increasingly useful. By fall, I was doing all the shopping, most of the cooking, and all of the cleanup. When Emma and Jake visited, I was their primary caretaker, while Lucas and Evelyn went out for romantic dinners or weekend getaways. When they entertained Evelyn's friends, I was expected to serve drinks and appetizers, then disappear upstairs so the adults could have their sophisticated conversations. The breaking point came in November during one of Evelyn's dinner parties. I'd spent the afternoon preparing appetizers and cleaning the house, then served drinks to her guests with a smile plastered on my face. As I was collecting empty glasses from the living room, I overheard Evelyn talking to her friend Jennifer. It's actually worked out perfectly, Evelyn was saying. Cindy handles all the domestic stuff, watches the kids when they're here, and her Social Security covers most of her expenses. It's like having live-in help, except she pays us for the privilege. Jennifer laughed. That's brilliant. You should write a book, How to Monetize Your Mother-in-Law. Standing there with a tray full of dirty glasses, listening to my living situation being discussed like a clever business scheme, something crystallized inside me. This wasn't temporary housing during a difficult transition. This wasn't family helping family through tough times. This was exploitation. Pure and simple. But I didn't say anything that night. I just carried the glasses to the kitchen, loaded the dishwasher, and went upstairs to my room. After all, I still had my weekly lottery ticket to look forward to. And sometimes, if you wait long enough, the universe has a way of evening the score. December arrived with an early blizzard and Evelyn's announcement that they were converting the basement into a mother-in-law suite for me. She presented this like it was a wonderful upgrade, complete with a small kitchenette and a separate entrance. You'll have so much more privacy, she explained, spreading architectural drawings across the dining room table. Your own space, your own entrance, almost like your own apartment. The basement. They wanted to move me to the basement. Lucas hovered nearby, looking uncomfortable but supportive. The contractor says it'll be finished by spring, and you'll have the kitchenette, so you won't need to use the main kitchen as much. Translation, they wanted to isolate me completely, eliminate even the minimal inconvenience of sharing common spaces with their house guest, who paid them wild $300 a month for the privilege. What if I don't want to move to the basement? I asked. Evelyn's smile tightened. Well, Cindy, we've been thinking about that too. This arrangement has been working well, but we're starting to feel like we need our space back as a couple. The basement suite would give you independence while keeping us all close. And if I prefer to find somewhere else to live? The silence stretched uncomfortably. Finally, Lucas cleared his throat. Mom, we've gotten used to having you here. You're family, but if you wanted to explore other options, we'd understand. Other options, at my age, with $50 a month in discretionary income, my other options were limited to subsidized senior housing with a 2-year waiting list or a studio apartment in the dodgiest part of town. They had me trapped, and they knew it. That Friday, I walked to Murphy's Corner store with more determination than usual. The snow was falling steadily, coating the sidewalks with a slippery layer of ice that made each step treacherous. But I was beyond caring about treacherous. My whole life had become treacherous. Rough weather for walking, Mrs. Green, Kevin called as I stomped snow off my boots. I've walked through worse, I replied, pulling my $5 from my purse. Same numbers as always. As Kevin printed my ticket, I found myself thinking about those numbers differently. 7 for the day I married Raymond, back when I was young and believed in happy endings. 14 for the day Lucas was born, when I thought I was raising a man who would respect and protect his family. 23 for our wedding anniversary, celebrating decades of partnership and mutual support. Maybe it was time for those numbers to represent something new. I tucked the ticket into my wallet right behind Raymond's old driver's license that I couldn't bring myself to throw away. Cross your fingers for me, Kevin, I said, same as always. Always do, Mrs. Green, this could be your week. Walking home through the snow, I passed a group of teenagers sledding down the hill behind the elementary school. Their laughter echoed across the frozen landscape, pure joy without any undercurrent of calculation or manipulation. I remembered Lucas at that age, how he'd spend hours building snow forts and refuse to come inside even when his clothes were soaked through and his lips were blue with cold. Where had that boy gone? When had he become someone who could look his mother in the eye and explain why moving her to the basement was really for her own good back at the house? Evelyn was in the kitchen on the phone with the contractor. Yes, we need the cheapest options for everything, she was saying. It doesn't need to be fancy. It's just for one elderly person. Just for one elderly person. That's what I'd become in my son's house. Not Cynthia Green, who'd raised 2 children and buried 1 husband and survived 67 years of joys and sorrows and everything in between. Just one elderly person to be managed as efficiently and inexpensively as possible. I went upstairs to my room, while I still had an upstairs room, and sat by the window watching the snowfall. In my purse, my lottery ticket waited patiently, carrying those familiar numbers that had never let me down, even when everyone else had. Sometimes the universe takes its time preparing justice, but when it arrives completely. The winning numbers were announced Friday night at 10:59 p.m. on Channel 7. I was in bed reading a library book about a woman who inherited a mysterious house when the lottery segment came on during the late news. Tonight's Powerball jackpot was $53 million, the perky blonde anchor announced. The winning numbers are 7, 14, 23, 31, 45, and Powerball 18. For a moment, my brain refused to process what I'd heard. Those were my numbers, my exact numbers, the ones I'd been playing faithfully for 32 years. I fumbled for the remote, rewinding the DVR to hear the announcement again. 7, 14, 23, 31, 45, and Powerball 18. My hands were shaking as I reached for my purse, pulling out the lottery ticket with fingers that suddenly felt arthritic and clumsy. There they were, printed in black and white. 7, 14, 23, 31, 45, PB 18, $53 million. I sat there staring at the ticket, waiting for the reality to sink in. After 32 years of hope and $5 investments, I had finally won. Not just won, I had won big. My first instinct was to run downstairs and tell Lucas and Evelyn, share the incredible news with family, celebrate this life-changing moment together. Then I remembered where I was sitting and why and how I'd gotten there. In their house. Paying them $1,300 a month rent while serving as unpaid domestic help and childcare. Scheduled to be moved to the basement in the spring because my presence in their lives had become inconvenient. Maybe I should keep this information to myself for a little while, just until I figured out what winning $53 million meant for my future. I slipped the ticket back into my wallet and turned off the TV. Sleep was impossible, but I lay in the dark for hours thinking. By dawn, I had the beginnings of a plan. Saturday morning arrived with typical chaos. Emma and Jake were visiting for the weekend, which meant Evelyn would disappear to get her nails done while I supervised breakfast, entertainment, and general child management. "Morning, Cindy," Evelyn said, already dressed in her workout clothes. "I'm heading to yoga, then the salon. Can you handle the kids?" "Of course," I replied, same as always. Lucas was in his office catching up on work emails before his golf game. The children were in the living room, still in their pajamas, arguing about what to watch on TV. It was during this perfectly ordinary Saturday morning chaos that Evelyn decided to tidy up the kitchen, which included emptying my purse to look for the grocery store coupons I'd clipped earlier in the week. "Cindy, where did you put those cereal coupons?" she called, rifling through my belongings. "They should be in the side pocket," I called back, focused on mediating the TV remote dispute between Emma and Jake. "Found them?" "And oh my goodness, what is this?" Something in Evelyn's voice made me look up. She was standing by the kitchen counter holding my lottery ticket, her face pale with shock. Did you buy a lottery ticket?" My stomach dropped, but I kept my expression neutral. "I buy one every week. Same numbers for 32 years. Evelyn was staring at the ticket like it was radioactive. "Cindy, do you know what the winning numbers were last night?" Before I could answer, she was grabbing her phone, frantically Googling. "Oh my God! Oh my God! Lucas!" Her shriek brought Lucas running from his office, golf shirt half buttoned, hair still messy from sleep. "What's wrong? Is someone hurt? The lottery ticket." Evelyn thrust the ticket at him with trembling hands. "Look at the numbers. Look at last night's drawing." Lucas took the ticket, frowning as he read the numbers. His frown deepened as Evelyn showed him her phone screen with the winning combination. The silence in the kitchen stretched like taffy, broken only by Emma asking if anyone was going to make pancakes. Finally, Lucas looked up at me, his expression unreadable. "Mom, do you realize what this means?" I realized exactly what it meant. The only question was whether they did. The next hour was pure chaos, and I watched it all unfold from my seat at the kitchen table like I was viewing someone else's life through a window. Evelyn was pacing the kitchen, phone pressed to her ear, talking to what sounded like every person in her contact list. 53 million, yes, million. We won the lottery. We won. That was interesting. Lucas had taken the ticket from Evelyn and was examining it like a forensic expert, comparing the numbers on his phone screen over and over. "This is real," he kept muttering. "This is actually real." Emma and Jake, sensing something momentous was happening, had abandoned their TV dispute and were standing in the kitchen doorway, eyes wide with confusion and excitement. "Are we rich now?" Emma asked. "We're very rich, sweetheart," Evelyn said, scooping her up for a spin around the kitchen. "We'll never have to worry about money again." I found myself thinking about Raymond, wondering what he would make of this scene. Probably something wry about chickens counting themselves before they hatched. Raymond had always been cautious about assuming outcomes before understanding all the variables. "Mom," Lucas said, still clutching the ticket, "we need to call a lawyer and a financial advisor and probably an accountant. There are taxes to consider and claiming procedures, and we should probably call that contractor and upgrade the basement plans," Evelyn interrupted. "I mean, if we're millionaires, we don't need to go with the cheapest options anymore." The basement again. Even in the midst of what they thought was life-changing good fortune, they were still planning to move me to the basement. "Actually," Evelyn continued, her voice taking on that particular tone she used when she was working through a problem, "we should probably think bigger than the basement. I mean, with this kind of money, we could buy a bigger house. Something with a proper mother-in-law wing. Or," her voice brightened, "we could look into one of those nice senior communities for Cindy, the expensive ones where they have activities and medical care and everything." Ah, there it was. The money was going to buy them a more elegant way to get rid of me. Lucas nodded enthusiastically. "That's a great idea, Mom. You'd probably be happier with people your own age, right? And we could afford one of the really nice places now." I watched my son and daughter-in-law make plans for my future, using money they assumed belonged to them to solve a problem they'd created by treating me like an inconvenience. The irony was so perfect, it almost made me laugh. "There's just one small detail we should probably address," I said quietly. Both of them turned to look at me, expressions expectant and slightly impatient, like parents listening to a child who was interrupting adult conversation. "The lottery ticket," I continued calmly, "is in my name." The silence that followed was different from before. This wasn't the shocked silence of unexpected good news. This was the horrified silence of people realizing they'd made a terrible assumption. "What do you mean?" Evelyn asked slowly. I held out my hand, and after a moment's hesitation, Lucas placed the ticket in my palm. "I mean," I said, looking down at the familiar numbers that had just transformed from hope into power, "that I bought this ticket with my money, from my purse, using the numbers I've played for 32 years, which makes it mine." Evelyn's face went through several fascinating color changes. But you live here. We're family. That money, it changes everything for all of us." "No," I said, standing up from the kitchen table with more dignity than I'd felt in 2 years. "It changes everything for me." The look of dawning realization on their faces was something I knew I'd treasure for years to come. The moment they understood that their unpaid housekeeper, their soon-to-be basement dweller, their convenient source of monthly rent money, had just become independently wealthy, and they were about to find out that $53 million could buy a lot more than a nice house. It could buy freedom. It could buy justice. And it could buy the most satisfying revenge a mother had ever served to ungrateful children. The kitchen fell so quiet I could hear the refrigerator humming and Emma whispering to Jake in the living room. Lucas and Evelyn stood frozen like someone had just announced that gravity was optional. "Mom," Lucas said carefully, "let's not get ahead of ourselves here. Yes, technically the ticket is in your name, but we're family. We share things, we support each other." I almost laughed out loud. Support each other, like when they supported me by charging me $1,300 a month to live in their guest room, or when they supported me by planning to move me to the basement. "You're absolutely right," I said sweetly. "We do support each other, which is why I've been supporting you with my Social Security check every month while doing all your housework and childcare for free." Evelyn's business brain was working overtime. I could see it in her eyes. She was calculating, strategizing, looking for an angle. "Cindy, honey," she said, using the voice she reserved for her most important clients. I think there's been a misunderstanding about our living arrangement. The monthly contribution you make, that's not rent. That's just your share of household expenses. We've never thought of you as a tenant. Is that so? I tucked the lottery ticket back into my wallet with deliberate care. Then I suppose you won't mind if I stop contributing to household expenses immediately, since I'm family, not a tenant. Lucas stepped forward, hands raised like he was dealing with a potentially dangerous animal. Mom, let's all take a breath here. This is huge news. Life-changing news. We need to think through the implications carefully. Oh, I've been thinking, I said. For about 8 hours now, since I saw those numbers last night, and I've come to some interesting conclusions. Evelyn's fake smile was starting to crack around the edges. What kind of conclusions? Well, for starters, I concluded that $53 million is enough money to live very comfortably for the rest of my life without depending on anyone else for housing. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. You're not serious, Evelyn whispered. You wouldn't just leave. Not after everything we've done for you. Everything they'd done for me, like taking my money every month while treating me like hired help, like planning to move me to the basement because my presence in their lives had become inconvenient, like discussing my living situation at dinner parties as if I were a clever business investment. I'm very serious, I said. In fact, I'm planning to call the lottery office first thing Monday morning to claim my prize, and then I'm going to start looking for a place of my own. Lucas was starting to panic. I could see it in the way he kept running his hands through his hair. Mom, you can't make decisions like this when you're emotional. This is too big, too complicated. You need help managing this kind of money. From who you? Yes, from us. We're your family. I looked at my son, really looked at him, and saw a stranger. When had Lucas become someone who thought I was too incompetent to manage my own affairs? When had he decided that being my child gave him rights to my choices? Lucas, I said quietly, when your father was dying, do you know what he made me promise? Both of them went very still. He made me promise that I wouldn't let anyone take advantage of my kindness. He said people would try, especially family, because they'd assume I was too polite or too weak to stand up for myself. The silence stretched until Evelyn finally cleared her throat. Cindy, I think you're overreacting to what was basically a miscommunication. Am I? I reached into my purse and pulled out a small notebook. Let me share some numbers with you. Over the past year, I've paid you $15,600 in household expenses. I've provided approximately 1,200 hours of unpaid childcare. I've done roughly 800 loads of laundry, cooked about 300 meals, and cleaned this house from top to bottom every week. Evelyn's face was getting redder with each number. In return, you've given me a guest room that you're planning to relocate to the basement and the privilege of listening to you discuss my living arrangements as entertainment for your dinner parties. That's not fair, Lucas protested. We've provided you with a home. You've provided me with room and board in exchange for payment and labor that exceeds what you provided by about $20,000. That's not generosity. Son, that's exploitation. The word hung in the air like smoke. And now, I continued, standing up and smoothing my sweater, I have the resources to explore other options. Sunday morning arrived with Evelyn in full crisis management mode. She'd obviously spent the night strategizing because she greeted me at the breakfast table with a 3-ring binder and her most professional smile. I've been doing some research, she announced, opening the binder to reveal printed articles about lottery winners. Did you know that 70% of lottery winners go bankrupt within 5 years? I poured myself coffee and settled in to watch the show. Is that so? Absolutely. The statistics are terrifying. Poor financial decisions, bad investments, family members taking advantage. It's a complete disaster for most people. She flipped through pages of highlighted text. That's why you need professional guidance. Family guidance. Lucas appeared in the doorway, looking like he hadn't slept well. Mom, Evelyn's right. This is way too big for any one person to handle alone, especially someone your age. No offense, Cindy, Evelyn added helpfully, but managing $53 million requires expertise in tax law, investment strategy, estate planning. It's incredibly complex. I took a sip of coffee and studied their earnest faces. They'd clearly spent considerable time preparing this intervention, working out their talking points and strategy. It was almost touching how much effort they were putting into convincing me I was incompetent. "You've given this a lot of thought," I observed. "We care about you," Lucas said. "We don't want to see you make mistakes that could ruin your financial security." "What kind of mistakes?" Evelyn leaned forward, sensing an opening. "Well, for instance, buying a house without understanding the tax implications, or making large purchases without considering how they affect your long-term cash flow, or trusting the wrong people with your money." "The wrong people?" I repeated. "Like who? Like financial advisors who charge huge fees? Or investment managers who push risky products? Or family members who might try to take advantage of your generosity?" Evelyn said, apparently without any sense of irony. I set down my coffee cup with deliberate precision. "Evelyn, let me ask you something. When I moved in here, did you research the average cost of assisted living facilities in our area?" Her eyes flickered with something that might have been guilt. What do you mean?" "I mean, did you look up what it would cost me to live somewhere else so you could price my room and board competitively?" Lucas shifted uncomfortably. "Because I did some research myself yesterday," I continued. "The average cost of a private room in a quality assisted living facility around here is about $1,800 a month. That includes meals, housekeeping, activities, and medical support." Evelyn was very quiet now. "You've been charging me $1,300 for a guest room and the privilege of doing my own housework, cooking, and childcare. That's not family helping family. That's a business arrangement, and not even a fair one." "It's not about money," Lucas said desperately. "It's about family, about staying together." "Is it? Then why were you planning to move me to the basement?" Neither of them had an answer for that. I closed Evelyn's binder and slid it back across the table. "I appreciate your concern about lottery winners going bankrupt, but I think you're worried about the wrong person making poor financial decisions." Evelyn's professional composure was starting to crack. "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means that in the past year, I've been subsidizing your lifestyle to the tune of about $20,000. Meanwhile, you've been planning home renovations, taking vacations, and buying new furniture while charging your elderly mother-in-law market-rate rent for substandard accommodations." Lucas looked genuinely confused. "Substandard, Mom. A room with no privacy, no independence, and a landlord who treats me like domestic help." I stood up from the table. "But that's all about to change." "Where are you going?" Evelyn asked sharply. "To call my lawyer." The look of panic that crossed both their faces was something I'd remember for a long, long time. That afternoon, while Lucas and Evelyn were huddled in their bedroom having what sounded like an intense discussion, I sat in my room calculating exactly how much I'd paid them versus what I'd received. The numbers were even more stark than I'd initially thought. Then I began making a list of what I would need for my new life: an apartment, furniture, a car. I'd been driving Raymond's old Buick until it finally died 6 months ago, and Lucas had convinced me I didn't need to replace it since you can always use our second car when we're not using it. Of course, somehow they were always using it. For 2 years, I'd been letting my grief and insecurity make my decisions for me. I'd been so afraid of being alone that I'd accepted treatment I would never have tolerated in my younger days. Raymond would have been ashamed of me. No, that wasn't fair. Raymond would have understood how grief can cloud your judgment, how loneliness can make you accept crumbs of affection when you deserve a feast. But he would have wanted me to find my strength again. A soft knock on my door interrupted my thoughts. It was Emma, holding a crayon drawing. "Grandma, I made this for you," she said, climbing onto the bed beside me. "It's you and me at the park." I looked at the drawing. A tall stick figure with gray hair holding hands with a smaller stick figure with pigtails. Both were smiling enormous smiles. Behind them was a swing set and a yellow sun. "It's beautiful, sweetheart," I said, feeling tears spring to my eyes. "I'll treasure it always." "Mommy and Daddy are fighting," she whispered. "They're saying bad words about money." I put my arm around her small shoulders. "Sometimes grown-ups get upset about adult things. It doesn't mean they don't love you. Are you going away? Grandma, I heard Mommy say you might go away." My heart squeezed painfully in my chest. This was the downside of independence, the possibility of seeing less of Emma and Jake. But then I reminded myself that Lucas and Evelyn regularly used my babysitting services to go on weekend trips without the children. There was no reason I couldn't still see my grandchildren regularly, perhaps even more on my own terms. I might get my own place to live, I said carefully. But that doesn't mean I'm going away from you. I'll always be your grandmother, no matter where I live. Emma considered this, her small brow furrowed in concentration. Could we come visit you? Would you have cookies? I laughed, feeling lighter than I had in months. Yes to both questions. The best cookies you've ever tasted. After Emma left, I made a decision. I pulled out my phone and called Walter Jackson, the lawyer Raymond and I had used for our wills and estate planning. Walter was expecting me at 200 the next day, and I was looking forward to the conversation. By Monday morning, news of my lottery win had spread through Cedar Falls like wildfire. Kevin Young had apparently put 2 and 2 together when he saw the winning numbers announced. And by noon, there were 3 news vans parked outside Lucas and Evelyn's house. I watched from my bedroom window as reporters knocked on the front door, asking for interviews with the mystery millionaire. Evelyn had taken to answering the door with her hair perfectly styled and her brightest smile, clearly hoping to be featured in the coverage. Mrs. Green is resting and not available for comment right now, she told the Channel 7 reporter. But as her family, we're just so excited for this blessing in all our lives. All our lives. That phrase was becoming Evelyn's favorite. My phone had been ringing constantly since 10:00 a.m., old friends from church, former co-workers from the insurance office where I'd worked before retirement, even my cousin Patricia from Minnesota. Everyone wanted to congratulate me, share in my excitement, and inevitably ask what I was planning to do with the money. What I was planning to do was meet with Walter Jackson, the lawyer Harold and I had used for our wills and estate planning. Walter was expecting me at 200, and I was looking forward to the conversation. Cindy, you can't leave the house right now, Evelyn said, intercepting me as I headed for the front door with my purse and car keys. There are reporters everywhere. They'll mob you. I have an appointment, I replied calmly. Can't it wait, at least until the media attention dies down? Lucas appeared beside his wife, both of them blocking my path like concerned bodyguards. No, it can't wait. Mom, be reasonable. You're not equipped to handle this kind of media circus. Let us help you navigate this. Navigate, another one of Evelyn's corporate terms. I've been navigating my own life for 67 years, I said. I think I can manage a walk to my car, but when I opened the front door, I understood their concern. There were indeed reporters crowding the front yard, cameras and microphones at the ready. The moment they saw me, they surged forward like a pack of excited puppies. Mrs. Green, how does it feel to win $53 million? What are you planning to do with the money? Is it true you've been playing the same numbers for over 30 years? I paused on the front step, looking out at the sea of expectant faces. Behind me, I could feel Lucas and Evelyn hovering, probably hoping I'd retreat back into the house, where they could continue their campaign to manage my newfound fortune. Instead, I straightened my shoulders and walked down the front steps with as much dignity as I could muster. I'm very grateful for this blessing, I told the reporters, stopping beside my car. As for what I'm planning to do with the money, I'm going to use it to live independently and make my own choices for the first time in 2 years. What do you mean by that? Mrs. Green. I looked back at the house where Lucas and Evelyn stood, framed in the doorway, and something settled into place inside me, something that felt like clarity and strength and long overdue honesty. I mean that sometimes in life you discover that the people you trust most have been taking advantage of your kindness, and sometimes the universe gives you the resources to do something about it. The reporters sensed a story brewing, pressing closer with their microphones. Can you elaborate on that? I've been living with my son and daughter-in-law for the past 2 years, paying them $1,300 a month in rent while providing unpaid domestic and childcare services. They were planning to move me to their basement because my presence in their main living space had become inconvenient. I could hear Evelyn's sharp intake of breath from the doorway. But now that I have the means to live independently, I'll be finding my own place, Somewhere I can be a guest when I visit my son rather than a paying tenant in his home. Are you saying your own family was taking advantage of you financially? I looked directly into the nearest camera, thinking about all the other elderly people who might be watching, people who might be in similar situations with their own families. I'm saying that family should be about love and respect, not business arrangements, and I'm saying that it's never too late to stand up for yourself, no matter what your age. The questions came faster after that, but I'd said what I needed to say. I got into my car and drove away, leaving Lucas and Evelyn to deal with the media circus I'd just created. In my rearview mirror, I could see Evelyn frantically trying to manage the situation, probably spinning some story about misunderstandings and family dynamics, but the truth was already out there, being broadcast across 3 counties, and I was just getting started. Walter Jackson's law office was a welcome refuge from the media chaos. At 75, Walter had the kind of calm, methodical approach that came from 40 years of helping people navigate life's complications. "Cynthia," he said, rising from behind his desk with a warm smile. "Congratulations. Raymond would be so proud." "Thank you." I settled into the familiar leather chair where Raymond and I had sat so many times discussing wills and insurance policies and all the practical details of a shared life. "I saw the news coverage," Walter continued, his expression growing serious. "Quite a statement you made to those reporters. Was it too much?" "Not at all. Sometimes the truth needs to be spoken plainly." He opened a file folder and pulled out a yellow legal pad. "Now let's talk about protecting your interests. Have you claimed the prize yet?" "I'm planning to drive to Des Moines tomorrow to meet with the lottery officials." "Good. I'd recommend taking the annuity rather than the lump sum for tax purposes. And we'll need to set up some trusts. Maybe a charitable foundation if you're interested in philanthropy." We spent the next hour discussing financial strategies, tax implications, and estate planning. Walter explained everything in terms I could understand, never once suggesting that the decisions were too complex for me to comprehend. It was while we were discussing living arrangements that Walter dropped his own bombshell. "Cynthia, there's something I need to tell you. Something Raymond made me promise to keep confidential unless specific circumstances arose." My stomach tightened. "What kind of circumstances? If your family ever tried to take advantage of you financially..." Walter opened another file, this one thick with documents. "Raymond was more aware of Lucas and Evelyn's situation than you realized." "What do you mean?" "He knew they were living beyond their means. He also suspected they were already planning to have you move in with them after his death. Not out of love, but out of financial necessity." The room seemed to tilt sideways. Raymond knew. He hired a private investigator to look into their finances about 6 months before he died. He was worried about what would happen to you. Walter pulled out a folder of documents. "Lucas and Evelyn are in significant debt. Cynthia, credit cards, car loans. Their mortgage is underwater. They've been living on borrowed money for years." I stared at the papers, seeing columns of numbers that painted a picture of financial recklessness and desperation. "Raymond wanted you to have this information if you ever needed it to protect yourself." Walter continued. "He also wanted you to know about the insurance policy." "What insurance policy?" Walter smiled sadly. "The one he took out specifically to ensure you'd have resources if Lucas and Evelyn became a problem. $500,000 paid directly to a trust account in your name. It's been sitting there earning interest for 2 years, waiting for you to need it." $500,000. Raymond had been protecting me from beyond the grave. "He knew," I whispered. "He knew this would happen. He loved you enough to prepare for it." Walter closed the file gently. "The question now is what you want to do with this information." I thought about Lucas standing in the doorway that morning, blocking my path while insisting he only wanted to help me. I thought about Evelyn with her binders full of statistics about lottery winners going bankrupt, positioning herself as my savior while she'd been bleeding me dry for 2 years. I thought about Raymond, who'd spent his final months not just fighting cancer, but fighting to protect me from our own son. "Walter," I said finally, "I want to have a family meeting. Tonight, I want Lucas and Evelyn to understand exactly what their financial situation looks like and exactly how much their mother knows about it. Are you sure, once you reveal this information, there's no going back?" I stood up from the leather chair, feeling stronger and more determined than I had in years. Walter, I've spent 2 years being treated like a convenient source of income by people who were supposed to love me. My husband saw this coming and tried to protect me. I think it's time Lucas and Evelyn learned what happens when you underestimate a woman from Cedar Falls. The look of admiration in Walter's eyes told me everything I needed to know. Raymond would indeed be proud. As Walter and I reviewed the trust fund documents, I felt a mix of emotions washing over me. Gratitude for Raymond's foresight, sadness that he'd spent his final months worrying about my future, and a strange sense of validation. Raymond had seen the truth about our son and his wife long before I was willing to admit it. The trust is structured to provide you with a monthly income, Walter explained, pointing to a section of the document. But you have access to the principal if necessary. Raymond was quite specific about this being entirely under your control. How did he know? I asked, still struggling to process it all. How did he see what was happening when I couldn't? Walter's expression softened. Raymond always saw people clearly. He told me once that Lucas had changed after marrying Evelyn, that he'd become too focused on appearances and material things. That sounded like Raymond, quietly observing, never judging harshly, but always seeing the truth. While I'd been making excuses for Lucas, blaming his behavior on stress or Evelyn's influence, Raymond had recognized the fundamental change in our son's character. There's more, Walter said, pulling out another document. The private investigator's report shows that Lucas and Evelyn have been living well beyond their means for years. Their mortgage payment alone is 45% of their monthly income. They have 3 credit cards maxed out, 2 car loans, and a home equity line of credit they've nearly exhausted. I scanned the documents, feeling my stomach sink. No wonder they were so quick to suggest I move in with them. They needed my Social Security check. And your free childcare and housekeeping services, Walter added. According to my calculations, they've been saving approximately $3,500 a month by having you live with them, between your monetary contributions and the value of your labor. The family meeting was scheduled for 7:00 p.m. I'd spent the afternoon preparing with Walter's help, organizing documents, and planning exactly what I needed to say. Lucas and Evelyn thought they were coming to discuss my emotional outburst with the reporters and find a way to manage the media attention going forward. They had no idea they were walking into a reckoning. Evelyn arrived first, armed with printed articles about lottery winners who'd been swindled by family members and a laptop full of spreadsheets showing how they could properly manage my windfall. Lucas brought a bottle of wine in his most conciliatory expression. "Mom, about what you said to those reporters," Lucas began as they settled into the living room. "We understand you were overwhelmed." "I wasn't overwhelmed," I interrupted calmly. "I was finally telling the truth." Evelyn opened her laptop with practiced efficiency. "Cindy, we've prepared a comprehensive financial plan that addresses all your concerns while ensuring your long-term security. Before we discuss my financial security," I said, reaching for the folder Walter had given me, "I think we should discuss yours." I placed the first document on the coffee table between us. Lucas glanced down at it, and the color drained from his face. "What is this?" Evelyn asked, though her voice suggested she already knew. "It's a complete financial profile of your household compiled by a private investigator your father hired before he died." I watched both of them go very, very still. He was worried about what would happen to me after his death. So, he did some research into your circumstances. Lucas was staring at the papers like they might catch fire. "Dad hired an investigator to spy on us, to protect me, which as it turns out was necessary." I pulled out another document. "You owe $47,000 in credit card debt across 6 different cards. Your mortgage is underwater by $32,000. You have 2 car loans totaling $18,000. And Evelyn, your business has been operating at a loss for 8 months. Evelyn's professional composure cracked completely. "How dare you invade our privacy like this? The same way you invaded mine when you decided I was too incompetent to manage a lottery ticket I bought with my own money." I kept my voice level, almost conversational. "For 2 years, you've been using my Social Security payments to service your debt while positioning me as a grateful dependent who should be thankful for your generosity." Lucas found his voice. "Mom, everyone has financial challenges. Not everyone charges their widowed mother $1,300 a month to live as unpaid domestic help while planning to move her to the basement. I placed another document on the table. This is a breakdown of what my living situation has actually cost me versus what it would cost to live independently. You've been overcharging me by about $600 a month while extracting approximately $1,500's worth of unpaid labor. The silence that followed was profound. That's over $25,000 a year you've been taking from me, I continued. $50,000 over 2 years from your own mother, while you were planning to isolate me further by moving me to your basement. Evelyn was crying now, but I noticed they were the kind of tears people cry when they're caught, not when they're sorry. We never meant for it to be like that, Lucas said desperately. We needed help, and you were family, and you thought I was too old and too grateful to figure out what you were doing. I stood up, feeling lighter than I had in months. But your father knew. He saw through both of you, and he made sure I'd have the resources to protect myself when I finally realized what was happening. I placed the final document on the table. This is notification of a trust fund Raymond established for me 2 years ago. $500,000 earning interest, waiting for me to need it. He also left instructions with Walter Jackson to monitor your financial situation and intervene if necessary. Lucas was shaking his head like he could make the truth disappear. I don't understand. Dad never said anything. Because he hoped he was wrong about you. He hoped that when the time came, you'd treat me with the love and respect he'd taught you to show family. I picked up my purse and headed for the door. Instead, you treated me like a business opportunity. Where are you going? Evelyn called after me. To start my new life. I've put a deposit on a beautiful apartment at Meadowbrook Senior Community. 2 bedrooms, full kitchen, my own car space, and a monthly fee that's less than what I was paying to be your tenant. I paused at the front door, looking back at the 2 people who'd taken advantage of my grief and loneliness for their own financial gain. Oh, and one more thing. Since you'll no longer have my income to help with your expenses, you might want to start planning how you'll manage that $47,000 in credit card debt. I hear financial stress can be very challenging for families. As I walked out to my car, I could hear Evelyn crying and Lucas trying to calm her down. But their crisis was no longer my problem. I had $53 million, a dead husband who'd loved me enough to protect me from beyond the grave, and the rest of my life to live on my own terms. By Tuesday morning, my confrontation with Lucas and Evelyn had become the lead story on every local news channel. Lottery winner reveals family's financial exploitation ran across the bottom of the screen as Channel 7 replayed my impromptu press conference on their morning show. I watched the coverage from my hotel room at the Cedar Falls Inn, where I'd checked in after leaving Lucas's house. I'd decided to stay there for a few days while finalizing the arrangements for my new apartment at Meadowbrook. My phone hadn't stopped ringing since the story broke. Old friends offering support, reporters seeking interviews, and most surprisingly, other elderly people sharing similar stories about their own children. There seemed to be an epidemic of adult children using their aging parents as convenient sources of income. Mrs. Green, the Channel 7 reporter had said during a follow-up interview that morning, your story has clearly struck a chord with many seniors in our community. Did you know how common this kind of situation is? I didn't, I admitted. I thought I was alone. I thought I was the only mother foolish enough to let grief and loneliness cloud my judgment. But it seems there are many of us who have confused love with obligation, who have accepted disrespect because we feared being alone. What would you say to others in your situation? I thought about it carefully, wanting to use this unexpected platform responsibly. I'd say that your age doesn't diminish your worth, that you deserve respect and kindness, especially from your family, and that it's never too late to set boundaries and demand better treatment. The reporter nodded. And what about your relationship with your son and daughter-in-law now? Is there any chance of reconciliation? That was the question that had kept me awake most of the night. Despite everything, Lucas was still my son, the boy I'd raised, the child I'd loved through scraped knees and report cards and first heartbreaks. Could I really cut him out of my life completely? I hope so, I said finally. But reconciliation requires acknowledgement and change. You can't rebuild a relationship on the same foundation that caused it to crumble in the first place. After the interview, I met with the lottery officials to claim my prize. As Walter had advised, I chose the annuity option rather than the lump sum, which would provide me with guaranteed income for the next 29 years while minimizing the tax impact. I also established the Green Family Foundation, a charitable organization dedicated to helping elderly people who had been financially exploited by family members. By Wednesday afternoon, I was ready to visit my new apartment at Meadowbrook Senior Community. The complex was located on the outskirts of Cedar Falls, nestled among oak trees with a view of the river. My unit was on the second floor, with a small balcony overlooking a courtyard garden. "This is lovely," I told the community director, Sarah Phillips, as she showed me around. "We're thrilled to have you join us, Mrs. Green," she said. "Though I must admit, we don't usually have residents with your financial resources. Most people who can afford it prefer to stay in their own homes." "I had a home," I said quietly. "It didn't work out." Sarah's expression softened with understanding. "Well, we aim to make Meadowbrook feel like home for all our residents. We have daily activities, a communal dining room if you don't feel like cooking, and a shuttle service to take you shopping or to appointments." As we continued the tour, I found myself picturing my life here. Morning coffee on the balcony, afternoon walks along the river path, book club meetings in the community room. It wouldn't be the life I'd planned with Raymond, but it could be a good life, a peaceful life. My phone buzzed with a text message from Lucas. "Mom, please call me. We need to talk." I slipped the phone back into my purse without responding. Lucas and Evelyn had had 2 years to talk, to treat me with respect, to consider my feelings. Now they could wait until I was ready. 2 weeks later, I was settled into my new apartment at Meadowbrook. The movers had brought the few pieces of furniture I'd kept in storage after selling the house: Raymond's favorite armchair, our dining table, and the bedroom set we'd bought for our 30th anniversary. The rest I'd purchased new, a luxury I'd never allowed myself before. My first visitors were Emma and Jake, brought by Lucas's ex-wife, Michelle. We'd always had a cordial relationship, and she'd called after seeing the news coverage to express her support. "Grandma," Emma squealed, running into my arms as soon as I opened the door. "Your house is so pretty." "It's an apartment, silly," Jake corrected, with all the authority of his 10 years. "Houses have stairs inside." I hugged them both tightly, breathing in the scent of childhood, a mixture of shampoo, candy, and that indefinable sweetness that belongs only to the young. "I brought cookies," I said, leading them to the kitchen where a plate of chocolate chip cookies awaited. "And I thought we might walk down to the duck pond after you've had a snack." As the children devoured cookies, Michelle and I sat at the dining table, speaking quietly. "How are you?" "Really?" she asked. "This whole situation must be incredibly difficult." "It's been illuminating," I replied. "I've discovered strengths I didn't know I had, and weaknesses I wasn't willing to acknowledge." Michelle nodded. "Lucas called me. You know, he's devastated. Says he never meant to hurt you." "I believe that he believes that," I said carefully. "But intentions don't erase actions." He stood by while Evelyn charged me rent that exceeded what I would have paid in a nice retirement community, all while expecting me to provide free childcare and housekeeping services. "For what it's worth, I don't think he fully understood what was happening," Michelle said. "Lucas has always been susceptible to strong personalities. It's partly why our marriage ended. He couldn't stand up to his mother, and then he couldn't stand up to Evelyn." I sighed, feeling the familiar twist of maternal guilt. Had I contributed to Lucas's inability to assert himself? Had my own strong personality somehow shaped him into someone who sought out controlling partners and then bent to their will? Maybe, I conceded. But he's a grown man with responsibilities to his children and to me. At some point, we all have to take responsibility for our choices. After Michelle and the children left, promising to visit again soon, I found myself standing on my balcony, looking out at the sunset painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. The sound of laughter drifted up from the courtyard below, where a group of residents were playing cards at a picnic table. "Beautiful evening," said a deep voice from the neighboring balcony. I turned to see an older gentleman with silver hair and kind eyes. He was watering a row of potted herbs that lined his railing. "It is," I agreed. "James Carter," he introduced himself. Apartment 2B. Former high school English teacher, current amateur gardener, as you can see. Cynthia Green, Apartment 2A. Former insurance office manager, current. Well, I'm not sure what I am currently. He smiled. I know who you are, Mrs. Green. Everyone at Meadowbrook knows the lottery winner who stood up to her exploitative family. You're something of a local hero. I felt my cheeks warm. I'm no hero, just a woman who finally found her voice. Sometimes that's the most heroic act of all, James said, offering me a sprig of fresh mint. For your tea. Welcome to Meadowbrook. Later that evening, as I was preparing for bed, my phone rang. It was Lucas. I hesitated, my finger hovering over the answer button. Part of me wanted to ignore it, to continue my silent treatment until he truly understood the hurt he'd caused. But another part, the part that had nursed him through chickenpox and celebrated his first home run, couldn't bear the thought of prolonging his pain. Hello, Lucas, I said, keeping my voice neutral. Mom? His voice cracked on the single syllable. Thank you for answering. I don't know where to begin. The beginning is usually a good place, I suggested, settling into Raymond's armchair, the one piece of furniture that still smelled faintly of him. I'm sorry, Lucas said. So deeply, profoundly sorry. For everything. For treating you like the convenience instead of my mother. For letting Evelyn dictate the terms of your living situation. For not standing up for you when I should have. The apology sounded genuine, but after 2 years of manipulation, I'd learned to be cautious. What prompted this sudden insight? There was a long pause. After you left, Evelyn and I had a huge fight. She wanted to contest the lottery claim. Said we could argue that you weren't of sound mind when you bought the ticket. That's when I realized. She doesn't see you as a person with rights and feelings. She sees you as an asset to be managed. And you're just realizing this now. I couldn't keep the edge from my voice. No, he admitted. I think I've known for a while, but it was easier to go along with her plans than to confront the truth. And honestly, Mom, we were drowning financially. The mortgage, the car payments, Evelyn's business losses. Your Social Security check became a lifeline we depended on. You could have asked for help, I said quietly. Your father and I would have helped you if you'd been honest about your situation. I know. But pride is a powerful thing. And Evelyn, she has certain expectations about our lifestyle. The house, the cars, the vacations. I couldn't bring myself to tell her we couldn't afford it all. I shook my head, even though he couldn't see me. So instead, you charged your widowed mother rent and used her for free childcare and housekeeping. How is that better than admitting you were living beyond your means? It's not, Lucas said, his voice breaking. It's so much worse. I betrayed the person who has always loved me unconditionally. I can't ask you to forgive me right now, but I'm hoping that someday you might give me the chance to earn back your trust. Despite everything, I felt a flicker of hope. Lucas was acknowledging his behavior without excuses or deflection. It was a small step, but an important one. I need time, I said finally. But I'd like to keep seeing Emma and Jake. They visited today, and I promised to take them to the duck pond next time. Of course, Lucas said quickly. Anytime you want. They miss you terribly. After we hung up, I sat in Raymond's chair for a long time, thinking about forgiveness and boundaries and what it means to love someone without allowing them to diminish you. Raymond had always been better at boundaries than I was. He'd known when to stand firm and when to bend, when to offer help and when to step back and let others face the consequences of their choices. I'm trying to be more like you, I whispered into the empty room, hoping that somehow, somewhere, he could hear me. The next morning, I met another of my neighbors, Margaret Wilson, a widow in her 70s with a no-nonsense attitude and a wicked sense of humor. So you're the lottery lady, she said as we waited for the elevator. Good for you, standing up to those vultures. My daughter tried something similar after my Harold died, suggested I sell my house and move in with her family. Then I found out she'd already taken out a loan against my property, forged my signature and everything. Now she's serving 5 years for fraud. And I'm here at Meadowbrook, living my best life. Margaret's blunt assessment of her own family drama made me feel less alone. As we walked to the dining room for the complimentary continental breakfast, she introduced me to several other residents, many of whom had their own stories of children who had viewed them as burdens or financial resources rather than people deserving of respect. "It's an epidemic," said Frank Johnson, a retired postal worker. "My son couldn't wait to get his hands on my pension, kept borrowing money he never repaid, then had the nerve to get angry when I finally said no. My daughter tried to have me declared incompetent when I wouldn't add her name to my bank account," added Doris Miller, a former librarian with bright eyes and a gentle voice. "The judge threw it out and suggested she get therapy instead." I listened to their stories, feeling a complex mixture of sadness that such behavior was so common and relief that I wasn't alone in my experience. By the time I returned to my apartment, I had 3 dinner invitations and a standing date for weekly bridge games in the community room. As I was unlocking my door, James Carter emerged from his apartment, dressed in khakis and a blue button-down shirt. "Good morning, Cynthia," he said with a warm smile. "Settling in all right, better than I expected," I replied. "Everyone's been very welcoming. This place has a way of becoming home rather quickly," he said. "I've been here 3 years now, after my wife passed. Didn't think I'd ever feel settled anywhere again, but Meadowbrook proved me wrong." Something in his tone resonated with my own experience, that mixture of grief and resilience, of building a new life from the fragments of the old one. "Would you like to come in for coffee?" I asked impulsively. "I just bought a new French press that I'm eager to try out." James's smile brightened. "I'd like that very much." As we sat on my balcony, sipping coffee and talking about books and gardening and the various personalities that made up the Meadowbrook community, I felt something I hadn't experienced in a long time, the simple pleasure of adult conversation without an underlying agenda. James wasn't trying to manage my money or my future. He was just a kind man enjoying coffee with a new neighbor. For the first time since Raymond died, I felt the faintest stirring of possibility. Not romance, necessarily. It was far too soon for that. But friendship, connection. The understanding that there might be a chapter of my life that wasn't defined by loss or exploitation, but by choices freely made and pleasures genuinely enjoyed. Later that afternoon, as I was arranging family photos on my bookshelf, my phone buzzed with a text message. It was from Evelyn. "We need to talk about the children's college funds." I deleted the message without responding. Whatever financial arrangements Lucas and Evelyn had made for their children were no longer my concern. I would support Emma and Jake in my own way, on my own terms, without going through their manipulative stepmother. The next day, a certified letter arrived from a law firm representing Lucas and Evelyn. They were requesting fair compensation for the improvements and care they had provided during my 2-year stay in their home. I called Walter immediately. "They're suing me?" I asked, my voice tight with disbelief. Walter's sigh crackled through the phone. "Not exactly. It's more of a demand letter, trying to intimidate you into paying them. They're claiming that they provided services worth far more than what you paid them, and now that you have money, they want what they consider their fair share. But Lucas just called me the other night, apologizing and saying he wanted to rebuild our relationship." "Was Evelyn present during this call?" "No, I don't think so." "That explains it," Walter said. "I suspect Lucas may genuinely regret his actions, but Evelyn sees only dollar signs. She's likely the driving force behind this letter." "What should I do?" "Nothing for now. Let me respond to their attorney. I have plenty of documentation showing the actual value of what you received versus what you paid. Plus, they'd have a hard time explaining to a judge why they charged an elderly widow market-rate rent while expecting her to provide free childcare and housekeeping services." After hanging up with Walter, I felt a surge of anger so intense it made my hands shake. Just when I thought Lucas might be seeing the light. This happens. It was like taking 1 step forward and 2 steps back. I needed to clear my head, so I decided to take a walk along the river path that wound behind the Meadowbrook property. The day was mild for December, with weak sunshine filtering through bare branches and glinting off the slow-moving water. As I walked, I tried to sort through my jumbled emotions: anger at Evelyn's relentless greed, disappointment in Lucas's inability to stand firm against her manipulations, sadness for Emma and Jake, caught in the middle of adult conflicts they couldn't understand, and underneath it all, a lingering grief for Raymond, whose absence had set this whole chain of events in motion. "Penny for your thoughts," said a voice behind me. I turned to see James Carter, bundled in a wool coat and red scarf, his breath forming clouds in the chilly air. "I'm not sure they're worth that much," I replied with a small smile. "Try me. I'm a good listener. 40 years of teaching teenagers tends to develop that skill." We fell into step together, and I found myself telling him about the demand letter, about Lucas's apology and subsequent reversal, about my conflicted feelings toward a son who seemed unable to break free from his wife's toxic influence. James listened without interrupting, nodding occasionally to show he was following. When I finished, he was quiet for a moment, considering. "You know," he said finally, "one of the hardest lessons I learned as a teacher was that I couldn't save every student. Some of them had to make their own mistakes, face their own consequences, before they could grow. Even when it broke my heart to watch them struggle." "Lucas is 42, not 16, I pointed out. "True. But emotional maturity doesn't always keep pace with chronological age. From what you've told me, your son is caught between his loyalty to you and his fear of his wife. That's not a justification for his behavior, but it might be an explanation. So what do I do? Keep forgiving him every time he claims to see the light, only to slide back into the same patterns?" James shook his head. "Forgiveness doesn't mean restoring trust that hasn't been earned. It means freeing yourself from the burden of resentment while maintaining appropriate boundaries. You can love your son without allowing him access to your finances or your emotional well-being." His words echoed what Raymond might have said: practical, compassionate, but clear-eyed about human nature and its limitations. "When did you get so wise?" "James Carter," I asked, only half joking. He laughed, a deep, genuine sound that warmed me despite the chill in the air. "Not wisdom. Just the perspective that comes from making plenty of my own mistakes and living long enough to learn from them." As we turned back toward Meadowbrook, the setting sun painting the river with streaks of gold and crimson, I felt something settle inside me, a kind of peace that came not from having all the answers, but from knowing I didn't have to face the questions alone. 3 months passed, bringing spring to Cedar Falls and a new rhythm to my life at Meadowbrook. My apartment now felt truly like home, filled with a mixture of treasured possessions from my life with Raymond and new items that reflected this latest chapter of my journey. The Green Family Foundation was up and running, with offices in downtown Cedar Falls and a small but dedicated staff working to help elderly victims of financial exploitation. We provided legal assistance, counseling, and in some cases, emergency housing for seniors who had been taken advantage of by family members. The foundation had already helped 27 people reclaim their independence and financial security, a fact that gave me immense satisfaction. My relationship with Lucas remained complicated. After Walter responded to the demand letter with a detailed accounting of what I had paid versus the value I had received, plus a warning about potential elder abuse charges, Evelyn had backed down. Lucas had called again, apologizing for the letter and claiming he hadn't known about it until after it was sent. "I want to believe you," I had told him, "but your actions and your words need to align before I can trust you again." We had settled into a cautious détente, with Lucas bringing Emma and Jake to visit me every other Saturday. These visits were always just the 3 of them. Evelyn was not welcome in my home, a boundary I had made clear, and Lucas had, somewhat surprisingly, respected. During these visits, I began to see small changes in Lucas. He was more attentive to his children, less distracted by his phone, more present in the moment. He asked about my life at Meadowbrook with what seemed like genuine interest, and occasionally mentioned that he and Evelyn were working on some things with a couples therapist. I maintained a polite skepticism. People could change if they truly wanted to, but change born of crisis tended to revert once the crisis had passed. Only time would tell if Lucas's awakening was genuine and lasting. Meanwhile, my friendship with James Carter had deepened into something precious and unexpected. We shared meals, attended concerts at the community center, and spent hours discussing books and politics and the peculiarities of our fellow residents. James was kind, intelligent, and possessed of a dry wit that often made me laugh until my sides ached. He had become, in the space of a few months, my closest friend and confidant. "You're good for each other," Margaret Wilson observed one day as we played bridge in the community room. "I haven't seen James smile so much since his Eleanor passed, and you've got more color in your cheeks than when you first arrived." I felt my face warm at her words. "We're friends, Margaret. That's all." She raised a skeptical eyebrow. "If you say so, dear. But friendship at our age is nothing to dismiss. It's the relationships that keep us young, not the numbers on our birth certificates." As spring turned to summer, Lucas called with news that he and Evelyn had sold their house and were moving into a more modest townhouse closer to the children's school. "We've been meeting with a financial advisor," he explained, "trying to get out from under all this debt and live within our means for a change." "That's a good step," I said cautiously. "How is Evelyn taking it?" There was a pause. "It's been an adjustment. But after the demand letter backfired and your foundation started getting all that positive press, she's been more willing to face reality. I think seeing you transform from someone she could manipulate into someone who's helping others stand up for themselves was a wake-up call." I wasn't entirely convinced, but I appreciated that Lucas was at least acknowledging the dynamics that had led to our estrangement. "My birthday is next month," I said, changing the subject. "I'm having a small gathering here at Meadowbrook. Would you and the children like to come?" "We'd love to," Lucas said quickly. Would it be all right if Evelyn came too? She's been asking to apologize to you in person." I considered this request carefully. Part of me wanted to maintain the boundary I'd established, to keep Evelyn at arm's length where she couldn't hurt me again. But another part, the part that remembered the joy of having my whole family together, wondered if a carefully managed reconciliation might be possible. "She can come," I said finally. "But I need you to understand something. Lucas, I'm willing to work toward forgiveness, but I will never again allow anyone to treat me the way you and Evelyn did. My boundaries are firm, and they're non-negotiable." "I understand, Mom. And for what it's worth, I think Evelyn does too. We've lost a lot these past few months, not just financially, but in terms of respect from friends and family who saw the news coverage. It's been humbling, to say the least." My birthday gathering was small but lively. James and several of my Meadowbrook friends, Michelle and her new husband, Emma and Jake, and finally, Lucas and Evelyn. Evelyn arrived with a bouquet of lilies, my favorite, and an uncharacteristic nervousness in her manner. "Thank you for including me today," she said quietly as she handed me the flowers. "I know I don't deserve it." "Let's see how the day goes," I replied, neither accepting nor rejecting her overture. "The food is on the patio, and James is mixing lemonade for anyone who wants it." The afternoon unfolded with surprising ease. Emma and Jake were excited to show me the cards they'd made, and James had everyone laughing with stories from his teaching days. Even Evelyn seemed different, quieter, more observant, less focused on dominating the conversation with tales of her business success or social connections. As we were cutting the cake, a beautiful lemon creation from the local bakery, Lucas tapped his glass for attention. "I'd like to make a toast," he said, his voice steady but emotional. "To my mother, Cynthia Green, for 67 years. She has shown me what strength, dignity, and integrity look like. For the past year, she's been teaching me the harder lesson of what happens when you fail to honor those qualities in the people you love." He turned to face me directly, his eyes bright with unshed tears. "Mom, I can never undo the hurt I caused you, but I promise to spend the rest of my life trying to be the son you deserve, the man Dad raised me to be." The sincerity in his voice touched something deep inside me, not enough to erase the past, but enough to open a small door to the possibility of a different future. "To Cynthia," James said, raising his glass, "who reminds us all that it's never too late to claim your worth and write a new chapter in your story." As everyone echoed the toast, I looked around at the circle of faces, some new friends, some old family, all part of this unexpected life I was building from the ashes of betrayal and loss. It wasn't the life I had planned. It wasn't the ending I had envisioned when Raymond and I bought our little white house with the black shutters all those years ago. But it was mine, chosen freely. lived intentionally, filled with people who saw me as I truly was, not just an elderly woman to be managed or exploited, but a whole person with value and agency and dreams still unfulfilled. Raymond would have been proud, and truthfully, so was I. 1 year after winning the lottery, I stood on the front porch of a familiar house, keys in hand, heart full of memories. After months of negotiations, I had finally bought back our old family home from the owners who had painted it yellow. The first thing I did was restore it to its original white with black shutters, a tribute to Raymond and the life we had built together. But this wasn't about going backward. I wasn't moving back into the house. I was donating it to the Green Family Foundation to serve as emergency housing for elderly people who needed a safe place to stay while rebuilding their lives after financial exploitation. The house that had witnessed so much love and later, so much betrayal, would now become a sanctuary for others walking a similar path. "It looks exactly as I remember it," Lucas said, standing beside me on the porch. Our relationship had slowly mended over the past year, though it would never be the same as before. Trust, once broken, never quite recovers its original shape, but we had found a new way to be family, more honest, more respectful, with clearer boundaries and fewer assumptions. "Your father would be pleased," I said, running my hand along the porch railing he had installed himself one summer long ago. "He always believed in second chances." "Do you?" Lucas asked quietly. "Believe in second chances." I considered the question carefully. I believe people can change if they truly want to. I believe relationships can heal if both parties are willing to do the work. And I believe that sometimes the greatest gift you can give someone is the opportunity to become better than they were. Lucas nodded, understanding the nuanced forgiveness I was offering, not a blank slate, but a cautious opportunity to rebuild on a more solid foundation. Evelyn had not changed as dramatically as Lucas might have hoped. She was still image-conscious, still focused on appearances and status. But the financial crisis and public humiliation had forced her to confront some hard truths about herself. She was working part-time now, contributing to their household income instead of draining it with a vanity business that never turned a profit. And while she and I would never be close, we had reached a state of civil interaction for the sake of the family. "Grandma," Emma called, racing up the front walk with Jake close behind. "Is this really where Daddy grew up?" "It is," I confirmed, bending down to her eye level despite my creaky knees. "This is where he learned to ride a bike and where he lost his first tooth. This is where we had Christmas mornings and birthday parties and ordinary Tuesday dinners." "Can we see inside?" Jake asked eagerly. "Of course. It's going to be a special house now. A place where other grandmas and grandpas can stay when they need help. Would you like to see what we've done with it?" As I led my grandchildren through the rooms of my old home, now furnished simply but comfortably for its new purpose, I felt a profound sense of rightness. This house had served its purpose in my life. Now it would serve others. Back at Meadowbrook that evening, James and I sat on my balcony, watching the sunset and sharing a bottle of wine. Our friendship had deepened into something neither of us had expected to find at this stage of life, a partnership built on mutual respect, shared interests, and the wisdom that comes from having lived long enough to know what truly matters. "To new beginnings," James said, raising his glass, "and to the remarkable woman who taught an entire community that age is no barrier to courage." I smiled, thinking of all that had happened since that snowy day when I'd bought a lottery ticket with the same numbers I'd played for 32 years. "You know," I said, "I still buy a ticket every week. Different numbers now. Though, what numbers do you play?" James asked. 67 for the age I was when I finally found my voice. 2 for the number of wonderful grandchildren who remind me why family matters, despite everything. 12 for the apartment number where I started my new life. 75 for a wise lawyer who helped me claim my power. 70 for a kind English teacher who became an unexpected blessing. "And the Powerball?" James asked, his eyes crinkling with amusement. 1, I said simply, "for the one life we get, and all the chances it gives us to begin again." The next morning, I walked to Murphy's Corner store, just as I had every Friday for 33 years. Kevin Young greeted me with his usual smile. "The usual?" Mrs. Green, or should I say, Ms. Philanthropist of the Year. I laughed at his reference to the award the local paper had given me for the work of the Green Family Foundation. Just Cynthia is fine, Kevin, and yes, the usual, as he printed my ticket with my new numbers. I thought about all the changes a year had brought, a new home, new friends, a repaired relationship with my son, a purpose bigger than myself, and even a hint of romance with a silver-haired English teacher who made me laugh. "Cross your fingers for me, Kevin," I said, tucking the ticket into my purse. "Always do, Mrs. Green. Though I'd say your luck has already changed for the better, lottery or no lottery." Walking back to Meadowbrook through the summer sunshine, I had to agree. The $53 million had given me the resources to escape a toxic situation, but the real windfall had been finding my voice, my boundaries, and my worth. Those were prizes no one could ever take away from me again. Raymond had always said that justice delayed wasn't justice denied. It was justice with better timing. Turned out he was right about that, too.